What if the Mongol invasions never happened? Imagine the thunder of hooves across the steppes, the crackle of arrows piercing the air, and the chaos left in the wake of an empire's advance. Now, erase it. What would our world look like if the Mongol invasions, one of history's most transformative and devastating chapters, had never occurred? Stay tuned as we unravel the ripple effects of a world untouched by Mongol conquest and speculation takes center stage. In the early 13th century, the Mongols began a campaign of conquest that reshaped both geography and destiny. Without those invasions, the immediate impact would have been monumental. For medieval Europe, the absence of Mongol forces would likely mean a reprieve from a wave of destruction that left entire villages reduced to rubble and populations decimated. Remember the famous accounts of Hungary and Poland struggling to resist the unstoppable Mongol forces? Without that existential threat, Europe might have continued its internal feudal squabbles unbothered. But while no Mongol invasions might seem like a blessing at first glance, consider this: the Mongols didn't just destroy, they connected. Their empire, spanning from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe, created the Pax Mongolica, a rare period of stability that revolutionized trade and cultural exchange along the Silk Road. Without this enforced peace, centuries of technological diffusion would have faltered. Gunpowder, paper, and advanced mathematics may have remained Asian secrets far longer, delaying their spread westward and the innovations they inspired in Europe. For Asia, the absence of the Mongols would fundamentally rewrite the trajectory of power dynamics. In China, the Song dynasty might have survived and flourished instead of falling to the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, the great city of Baghdad, a center of knowledge, science, and art, might never have been reduced to ashes. The short-term impacts of no Mongol invasions are staggering in scope, but it's the long-term effects that change the course of history entirely, and potentially alter the very world we live in today. Fast forward to centuries after the would-be Mongol conquests. Without their empire connecting disparate civilizations, would Europe's renaissance have been delayed, or even prevented altogether? It was through Mongol trade networks that crucial knowledge systems, like preserved Greek sciences and Asian advancements in astronomy and medicine, arrived in Europe. And what about the rise of Russia? Historically, the Kievan Rus were devastated by the Mongols, which paved the way for Moscow to rise as a dominant power in the aftermath of the invasions. Without the Mongol yoke forcing centralization, the Rus could have taken a drastically different path. Imagine an alternate world where Kievan Rus grew to rival the kingdoms of Western Europe, not as fractured principalities, but as a united state reaching across Eastern Europe and beyond. Across Asia, the story is just as fascinating. In Persia, the Mongols obliterated power structures and caused vast destruction. Would a Persia untouched by the Mongols have boasted an extended period of cultural dominance over the Middle East? Would this have reshaped trade routes and the balance of Islamic power across the region? And yet, even this barely scratches the surface. Imagine the entire Indian subcontinent's history unfolding without Mongol invasions reshaping who would eventually rule it. Would the Mughal Empire, tracing its origins back to Central Asian Genghisid heritage, have ever come to be? One of the most defining elements of the Mongol conquests was the unity they imposed across fractured regions of Eurasia. Without that unity, entire global systems could have faltered or evolved with much less efficiency. The Pax Mongolica, a stabilizing period of economic and cultural fusion, fostered globalization centuries before the term existed. No centralized trade routes mean no rapid spread of key innovations. Technologies like gunpowder, which transformed warfare across the world, might have remained isolated in China. The same holds true for printing, advanced metallurgical techniques, and navigational tools. It also begs the question, would knowledge exchanges, including the introduction of Eastern mathematical systems to Europe, have been delayed? The absence of such critical interactions could have left Europe stagnating in its medieval shell longer. And yet, beyond technology, consider the biological impact. The infamous Black Death, exacerbated by Mongol trade routes, might have unfolded differently, or not at all. With so many potential changes, how does this imaginary world stack up against reality? In Europe, No Mongol invasions might have meant the absence of external threats, forcing unity among warring factions. Without that pressure, the continent's fractured states might have clung to their isolation long after other regions evolved. Over time, this could have left Europe geopolitically stagnant and far less influential on the global stage. China offers an especially intriguing what-if. Historically, the destruction and disruption wrought by the Mongols left China in a weakened state that contributed to the self-imposed isolation of the Ming dynasty. But in a timeline without this upheaval, could China have led the charge into a new age of exploration and global trade centuries earlier? Alternatively, would internal dynastic struggles have taken Mongolia's place in destabilizing the region entirely? History is seldom devoid of conflict, and the unknown can take many forms. Then there's the cultural legacy, or lack thereof. The Mongols didn't just conquer. They absorbed and transmitted culture, art, and knowledge across continents. No Mongols means no Marco Polo bringing tales of the East to Europe, no hybrid architectural styles in conquered regions, and perhaps even no impetus for later European expeditions seeking to chart new routes to the trade-rich East. Let's leap forward to the modern day. How different might our world appear without the Mongols' influence on boundaries, nations, and global trends? Could today's superpowers look entirely unrecognizable? For example, a stronger united Islamic world might have led to greater cultural dominance across Europe and Africa. Or perhaps Kiev and Rus, untouched by Mongol destruction, could have become the superpower we recognize today instead of the fragmented states that evolved into modern Russia. Modern technology too may wear the marks of this altered history. Would the Industrial Revolution and the Age of Exploration have happened at the same pace? Could globalization as we know it have taken shape, or would the world remain fractured into isolated centers of power? Finally, imagine the impact on our cultural lexicon. The Mongols left behind massive legacies through language and culture, from administrative innovations to the spread of traditional Mongolian practices in law and governance. Without their contributions, the global cultural fabric would undoubtedly look different, but would it be richer or poorer for it? The further we wade into this alternate history scenario, the more apparent it becomes. History is a web of interconnected events, and pulling any one string completely rewrites the tapestry. What if the Mongol invasions had never happened? How differently might humanity have evolved? And would the world we live in today be better or worse for it? We want to hear from you. What's your theory about how history would have unfolded in a world untouched by Mongol conquest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into speculative history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to join us on more journeys through alternate timelines. In the vast and unpredictable turning points in history, the Mongol invasions stand as a keystone moment. But thanks to the power of imagination, we can begin to uncover the countless what-ifs that remain tantalizingly out of reach.